working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. The Office of Civil Defense today put the amount of damage to infrastructure and agriculture due to a low-pressure area, shear line and northeast monsoon since January 2 at more than 620 million pesos.
You mentioned the South China.
President Marcos said the tension in the disputed South China Sea keeps him up at night, but his country is committed to peace despite Beijing's territorial claims. Faltering global employment growth and the pressure on decent working conditions risk undermining social justice. That is according to the ILO's World Employment and Social Outlook Trends 2023 report. First in our news, the Office of Civil Defense today put the amount of damage to infrastructure and agriculture due to a low-pressure area, shear line, and northeast monsoon since January 2 at more than 620 million pesos. In a bulletin, the OCD said infrastructure damage was placed at 206.96 million in Mimaropa, Bicol Region, Central Visayas, Northern Mindanao, Davao Region, Soc-Sargen, and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARM. Meanwhile, agriculture damage was estimated at 414.35 million pesos in Cagayan Valley, Central Luzon, Mimaropa, Western Visayas, Eastern Visayas, Northern Mindanao, Davao Region, and Soc-Sargen. The OCD placed damaged houses at 1,661, with 1,135 classified as partially damaged and 526 as totally damaged. It put the number of reported deaths at 33, with 18 confirmed and still being validated, missing individuals at 7, injured persons at 12. Meanwhile, the Office of Civil Defense reported that the number of deaths from the effects of bad weather due to the low pressure, shear line, and the northeast monsoon since January 2, it has now climbed to 33. In its bulletin, the OCD said these casualties are from 13 regions, and they're Cagayan Valley, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Mimaropa, Bicol, Western and Central Visayas, Eastern Visayas, Zamboanga Peninsula, Northern Mindanao, Davao Region, Soc-Sargen, and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Out of this figure, 18 have already been confirmed, 8 from Zamboanga Peninsula, 7 from Eastern Visayas, 2 from Northern Mindanao, and 1 from Davao Region. The remaining 15 are still undergoing validation, 6 from Northern Mindanao, 5 from Bicol, 3 from Zamboanga Peninsula, and 1 from Soc-Sargen. The number of injured and missing persons are 12 and 7, respectively. Bad weather has plagued the country's southern and central islands since the December 25 weekend, when downpours triggered flooding and landslides that left 52 people dead and forced hundreds of thousands to flee their homes. Since January 3, back-to-back storms have killed dozens as floodwaters swept through houses, cut roads, and swamped crops. In tonight's other news, Vietnam's rubber-stamped National Assembly approved the resignation of President Nguyen Xuan Phuc, and this was a day after he dramatically stepped down as part of an anti-corruption drive. Mr. Phoc's resignation came after rumors he was next in line to be ejected, and his exit makes him the highest-ranking party member to be purged, with analysts saying his removal is part of the transforming of the party. On Tuesday, the Communist Party ruled the 68-year-old was responsible for wrongdoing by senior ministers under him during his 2016 to 2021 stint as prime minister before he became president. 2 deputy prime ministers, Pham Binh Minh and Vu Duc Dam, were sacked this month in an anti-corruption purge that has led to the arrest of dozens of officials, with many of the grave allegations relating to deals done as part of Vietnam's COVID pandemic response. Authoritarian Vietnam is run by the party, which is officially led by the General Secretary, President, and Prime Minister. With no successor yet appointed, Vo Thi Anh Xuan, the current Vice President automatically becomes interim president according to the Constitution. Meanwhile, President Marcos said the tension in the disputed South China Sea keeps him up at night, but his country is committed to peace despite Beijing's territorial claims. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, the president said his nation was watching as a bystander whenever tensions rise after Chinese or U.S. warships cross the region. Let's listen in.
You mentioned the South China Sea. Is that something that keeps you up at night? The South China Sea situation, yes. Is that something that keeps you up at night?
Keeps you up at night, it keeps you up in the day, keeps you up most of the time. It's something, it's very dynamic. It's constantly in flux. So you have to pay attention to it and to make sure that you are at least aware of the present situation, so that you are able to respond properly. So it's well, we in terms of, let's say, cross-strait tensions, we're at the very front line. We are at the very front line, and so whenever these tensions increase, when the ships come out, the Chinese send their Coast Guard vessels, the Americans answer, we are watching as bystanders, and said if something goes wrong here, we are going to suffer. And that's why when asked what is your foreign policy and how would you describe it, I say it's a commitment to peace and hewing very, very close and guided very, very closely by our national interests, as I mentioned before.
Staying in Davos on the U.S.-China relations, the former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Lawrence Summers, said it would be an enormous and staggering error for the U.S. to decide that it was its policy to suppress Chinese economic growth. Let's listen in.
It would be an enormous and staggering error for the United States to decide that it was its policy to try to suppress Chinese economic growth in the name of our national security. An enormous and staggering error to decide that. I think it is a very difficult problem because I think two things are true with respect to semiconductors, and the combination is very painful. Thing one that is true is I don't think we're restricting the export of anything where there is not a reasonable argument to make that it can contribute substantially to a weapons system. Thing two that is true is only 5% of what we're restricting is actually going to have anything to do with weapons systems. And so I think those two facts together say that this problem of export controls is much more difficult than it used to be when we were restricting things that were for guidance systems that didn't also have use in a wide variety of other things.
Meanwhile, European Central Bank Chief Christine Lagarde said the Eurozone economy will fare a lot better this year than initially feared, as hopes grow that countries can avoid a painful recession. Let's listen in.
But the first thing that we look at is the activity. And the activity on a global basis, the activity at the euro area level. And I agree with you that the news have become much more positive in the last few weeks. And you know, the rhetoric has moved from recession in Q3, Q4, and possibly plus, to recession in Q4 and Q1 of 23, to now this small contraction, and with leaders of some of the major players in Europe actually arguing that there will be no recession. We look at that, and what we are seeing at the moment is clearly an activity that is declining compared with an excellent 2022, where growth was 3.4, to a growth projections that we have for 23 of 0.5. So it's not a brilliant year, but it is a lot better than what we had feared. So we start with that. So on inflation, we have way too high numbers. I know that a lot of journalists made a big fuss about the fact that headline numbers had gone down most recently. And you also mentioned yourself that we have to look at core inflation, which is certainly critically important. So we look at all decomposition of inflation, from headline to core to sticky to stripped out, all sorts of elements. And inflation, by all accounts, however you look at it, is way too high. And our determination at the ECB is to bring it back to 2% in a timely manner, and taking all the measures that we have to take in order to do that.
Now, this cautious optimism comes as sky-high energy prices, which soared last year because of the war in Ukraine, have started to fall. The ECB has already hiked interest rates aggressively to tame inflation, lifting its key rates by 2.5 percentage points since July. Ms. Lagarde reiterated that further interest rate raises would follow in order to bring inflation back to the ECB's 2% target. The intersection of trade and climate has been a key talking point at the World Economic Forum, according to Michael Froman. He also points to digitalization and protectionism as a key discussion point for trade. Take a look.
Here at Davos, this morning I was at a Gavi breakfast where we talked about the nexus of digitalization and health. The digital revolution and green energy has been a major subject matter here. I think the combination where so much of our economy is now focused on digital transformation, making sure that those issues are fully dealt with at the WTO as well, I think is an important thing. The last thing I would say is I think one of the most interesting observations coming out of this Davos has been where there has one could use either the word collision or the merger of the trade and the climate world. And on the positive side, of course, the meeting of the Coalition of Trade Ministers on Climate and that group, very important development in that regard. There's been a lot of discussion here about the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States and tensions between the U.S. and other countries on that. I think one thing to keep an eye out for, of course, is also the border adjustment tax that the EU is considering, and some of the feedback that they are receiving from developing countries and others about the complexity of doing that and doing that well so that it doesn't become an umbrella for further protectionist measures.
Staying in Davos, a panel of experts at the 2023 World Economic Forum highlighted how the metaverse could deliver practical use cases of large-scale industrial industries like healthcare and retail. The metaverse continues to be a central talking point among leaders and decision makers in global industries. For many, the vision of the future of the metaverse is not limited to a gamified version of reality. Again, let's listen in.
The current 2D world of the digital world that we live in today is not fit for purpose in the 21st century. And I'll share with you a story from neuroscience to prove it, since we have Siemens Healthcare here with us on the panel. There was a patient by the name of Elliot. He used to be a lawyer. And his doctor, Antonio Damasio, extracted a tumor from the right side of his brain. And surprisingly, post the surgery, he was not capable to make decisions anymore, because it is emotions that drive action, not logic that drives thinking. And this is why the 2D world did not work at the time of remote education, remote work, and this is why you have companies like Salesforce.com, JP Morgan calling people back into the office. Because it's not only killing productivity, I would presume it's killing the next generation leaders. We all love it in a meeting when you nudge your colleague to make sure that you tap him on the back when he's doing a great job. Or another colleague that is doing a fantastic presentation and you give her 2 thumbs up or feedback post that session. This is why genuinely I'm a big advocate of the metaverse, that it's going to be the next wave of how immersive experiences work for consumers, enterprises, and the industry.
Well, I take an example from our company. Our signature business is medical imaging. Yeah? And one way to look at imaging is it actually, instead of producing slices, yeah, so the 2D example, look at it as producing a digital copy of the patient. Yeah? And you can interact with this digital copy, so to say, in the metaverse. It's terminology we don't really use in healthcare, but it is basically where things are going.
With this type of technology, a headset on your eyes, they can bring them on board much more quickly. They reduce their training costs by 80%. PBX Linear, a small Midwestern manufacturer, has been using it. 80% reduction in training costs. But interestingly, 25% reduction in rework and scrap, which is a real savings right there. But the one that I found the most, the most promising is the engagement that the employees had. They feel more empowered. They don't have to go ask somebody because the answers are, they're basically wearing a PC on their eyes. The answers are in front of them. And the retention that it's caused, which is right now a huge problem in the industry. The industry, in industrial manufacturing settings are retiring. They're retiring in droves, and they can't bring enough people on.
When we talk more generically about automation, where you felt a threat because you were going to be replaced, I think what we see in many of the cases with mixed reality is actually more real-time, helpful data that empowers the person doing their job. Maybe can do it safer, maybe they can do it smarter. And I think we've seen that in many cases. So I've seen less of a conflict, to be honest, in that. Then I think you have to try it on to see the power of it.
Right.
Yeah? So I think we have a responsibility, and I think learnings from our previous work with AI, how can we make sure that we have a fully inclusive data set when we are rendering, visuals, images, faces, but also how we interpret different body language. All of that will come through as we evolve this. And I think quite often we say best effort first, and this is an afterthought. I think we have an opportunity to make sure we have a rich, more inclusive data set from the start.
In tonight's other news, faltering global employment growth and the pressure on decent working conditions risk undermining social justice. That is according to the ILO's World Employment and Social Outlook Trends 2023 report. Let's listen in.
The global economy faces a very challenging year ahead. The Ukrainian war, geopolitical tensions, disruption in supply chains, high inflation, the tightening of monetary policies and great uncertainty overall are all contributing to depressing the prospects for labor markets. The growth of global employment is projected to slow to 1%, which is half of the growth of employment in 2022, and it's 0.5 percentage points lower than what the ILO had projected last year. As far as unemployment is concerned, we are anticipating that there will be a rise of 3 million unemployed in 2023. If we are taking a new measurement of unemployment, which is the global employment gap, which captures the unmet demand for employment. So in addition to the 208 million of unemployed looking for a job, there are other 267 million people who would like to work but are not working, either because they are discouraged, they have been looking for a job unsuccessfully and they have decided to stop looking for it, and others that would like to work but because of family responsibilities, for instance, are not in a position to make themselves available for paid employment.
The steep increase in the number of Rohingya refugees risking their lives to cross the Andaman Sea and Bay of Bengal last year reflects their growing desperation, according to the UNHCR. The spokesperson, Shabia Mantu, told journalists in Geneva that there's still no comprehensive regional response among coastal South Asian nations to protect the refugees from people smugglers who offer false hope. Take a look.
More than 3,500 desperate Rohingya have attempted deadly sea crossings in 39 boats in the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal in 2022, according to latest data from UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. This represents a 360% increase on the year before, when some 700 people made these journeys. Calls by UNHCR to maritime authorities in the region to rescue and disembark people in distress have been ignored or have gone unheeded, with many boats adrift for weeks. We're hearing reports, as we mentioned, from Rohingya about this growing sense of desperation and this anxiety about the future, and really the hope for security, for protection. Some of them are willing to unite with family members. Others, their vulnerabilities are being exploited by traffickers or smugglers, luring them with false promises and false hope. The movements that we're talking about today, they are of Rohingya refugees. They're refugees that require international protection. They should not be deported. They should be provided with protection and assistance. So we're urging on states to ensure that they abide by their international legal obligations in disembarking them, rescuing them at sea, disembarking them, and then ensuring that they're protected and not returned to situations of danger where their lives may be at risk. Most Rohingya refugees are being hosted by Bangladesh. The people of Bangladesh, the local communities and the government have been generous in hosting them and receiving them and providing them with protection and assistance, but they do require more support to ensure that they are able to be supported during their displacement.
The UN agency's latest warning about the situation comes amid an ongoing military crackdown in Myanmar by generals who seized power 2 years ago, and the continued absence of a comprehensive regional response among coastal South Asian nations to protect refugees' lives at sea and prevent their exploitation by people smugglers. And we go back now to the Asian Food Expo in California, where Eva and Alan Basilaje shows us where this Asian food wholesaler who's bringing trendy Chinese eats to the U.S. market. Let's take a look.
Authentic Chinese food? It's not an overseas dream.
Because in cities coast to coast, OCM Globe Incorporated brings known and rising Chinese brands to the American dinner table.
OCM is a food distribution company. What we do is we bring in the most up-and-coming, the in and the newest items from China, including snacks, drinks, and even ingredients to America, and we introduce it to the American public. We do a lot of marketing things to educate the general public about what's in China and what's the good taste or some authentic taste that the Chinese people like. We bring in all different types of brands, but we have traditional styles which are for maybe people who have been here a lot for a long time, or maybe like for the older generation, including Ying Jingqian and also like Wang Laoji. These are the brands that everyone have known all their lives, so when they see it here, they enjoy it a lot. But we also bring in some really new brands, including Weilong and Genki. These two brands, all the young people, maybe who just come here or people who are newly immigrated, they recognize, and it's something that they always like and try.
OCM 从今年开始的话，我们的产品逐渐进入主流。那之后我们的这个
OCM, not only are we doing Chinese products. Right now, if you look around, you'll see that we have products from Korea, from Japan, and also from other Southeast Asia countries. So what we strive to do is bring in all the different authentic tastes to the U.S. And so that's why we also want to promote it to the general public. That's why you can find us in more mainstream supermarkets. But the reason why you have to come here to Hall 5 is because we will bring in everything that you see in 10 different markets and all here.
Flexing its promotional arm, OCM also boasts products from countries like Korea and Japan.
All in an effort to connect palates in the U.S. with the genuine flavors of Asia.
Eva and Alan, Pomona, California. Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
now to Vietnam, where we learn more about the Dong Tao chicken. Each one can take years of raising and special care. And the best are even entered into beauty competitions across Vietnam. So what does it take to raise a Dong Tao chicken? And why are they so expensive? Let's take a look.
Ăn thịt gà thứ nhất là không béo, rất là đẹp da cho nhất là phụ nữ các chị. Đấy. Đặc biệt là nó rất là nhiều collagen. Đấy. Đấy mà rất là nhiều nhất là đôi chân. Đấy. Thứ nhất là thời gian nuôi lâu hơn, chân nó sẽ to hơn, càng ngày chân nó sẽ càng to, chất lượng thịt nó sẽ càng nhiều hơn, vì nó sẽ nặng hơn, nuôi lâu nó sẽ nặng hơn. Đấy, và da lại giòn hơn.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, reminding you to stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.